Welcome back to the Turnaround Boardroom. I am your host, Paul Maskill, and this podcast is for home service business owners who want to understand their numbers better. We stop lying to ourselves. We remove our emotions, ego, and excuses, and we're going to let the numbers guide us. We are focusing on helping home service business owners create predictable profitability and consistent positive cash flow. Today, we have with us two experts, and we're going to learn all about how they actually look at business when it comes time to sell your business. Remember, all of our episodes discuss real business, real life. Nothing discussed here should be considered financial, legal, or tax advice for your specific situation. Every business, including yours, is different. Today, we have with us Brandon, Jacob, and Michel. Brandon has guided countless privately held service contractors to achieve their ultimate goal, successfully selling their businesses. Brandon's passion for guiding his clients has earned him the opportunity to help multiple industry icons and numerous second and third generation businesses. And he recently co-authored the book, The Business Exit Roller Coaster, with Michel, and they are both here today. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's get into it. You guys wrote The Business Exit Roller Coaster. Brandon, if you want to lead us off, what's that mean?
Well, Paul, the Business Exit Roller Coaster, the introduction that you made was about understanding numbers, and that's certainly like part of operating a profitable business. The Business Exit Roller Coaster's premise is bringing to business owners, not just in the home service industry, but in all industries, the guide to understanding the fact that a sale of the business is an emotional journey, and to address some of those fears and concerns that all business owners, whether they're small, medium, or large, have prior to and during and even after selling their business. We to make it real, Matt and I interviewed over 100 former business owners who have sold their business, and did hour and a half conversations about how they felt throughout the process, and we were able to synthesize that into the Business Exit Roller Coaster.
Yeah, and I love the name of it because as someone who has sold a business before, it is a roller coaster. And obviously the clients that I work with, some of them are going through that same process of, man, my ultimate goal is to sell. And then they get an offer that they wanted, they dreamed of. And then they start to go through this process of like, oh man, what am I'm going to feel so bad with my teammates. And then all of a sudden we have a good month and we're like, should we actually sell? Because we're doing better than when we got valued. And then all of a sudden we have a bad month and it's like, oh, are they going to give us the same price? And oh man, this person just left. So there's so many emotions when it goes to sell the business. But if we can start to dive into, obviously you had over 100 conversations, which is impressive. What were some of the top one or two themes that you guys really started to pick up along the way, that our listeners should know about?
Matt?
Well, one of the most common themes we had, a couple things is, one is a lot of people took a DIY approach to the most important financial transaction of their lives, and that's a mistake. Others use some type of representative, an M&A advisor, a broker, an investment bank, and it's our premise that the people that used some type of representative for them got a higher price, had an easier time, and made fewer mistakes, less unforced errors. We use an analogy in the book where we talk about, imagine that you and a golf pro go to the driving range, and both of you are equal on the range. Your long game, your mid game, your short games are all the same. But when you get onto the course, this is your first time to play the course or any course, and you try to save a little money. You don't even get a caddy. You decide you're going to make your own club and shot selections. By contrast, the pro has played not just that course, but many courses. And he's played it multiple times. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's got a great caddy with him. And whenever there's an emotional problem, when you have a bad shot, your game gets worse and worse. You start making mistake after mistake. Well, the pro doesn't, and the pro's used to playing for money. You're not. The pressure gets to you. You make unforced errors. So that's number one. I think there's a lot of other things that we ran into. I think it was somewhat of a surprise that it was after the business owner walked away that the greatest trauma occurred, and a lot of them struggled to handle it. So I think that's that's part of it, and that requires a lot of planning and preparation to avoid having some type of post sale depression, regret. Of course, we asked every one of them, would you give the business back, or would you take the business back and give back the money? And none of them would. So, I guess regret has its limits, right? But those were a couple of the things that just jumped out. Another thing that came out, and I even had somebody message me about this today, is we concluded that entrepreneurs, or that extroverts have an easier time with the transition, or a harder time with the transition than introverts. The introvert, walks away from the company. One of the guys we interviewed in the book is building a car, building a Ford Mustang from ground up, doing a kit car. But the extroverts have a tougher time because they've got to be around people. Now they're not around people. They're not around their customers, their team. They're not around people that they know in their industry. And so extroverts really need to plan and prepare and make sure that they've got a purpose for their lives once they walk away from the company. Introverts seem to have an easier time of it. So those are a couple of top line
That
things we uncovered.
One that pops out to me, Paul, and you mentioned it in your intro, was employees, right? And this is and Matt's talking about the post and the trauma that business owners have post, but pre-sale, and I've seen this throughout my careers. What about my team? What about my employees? Are my employees going to be taken care of? That is an amazing hurdle that so many business owners put in front of themselves, that to some extent fail to even go through the process of selling their business, and others make it, literally make it, the issue of their entire transaction. And all 100 or 100 plus interviews we had, we would ask that question, and it was really fascinating to learn. And it's all in the book. It's really fascinating to learn how some people took care of their employees, some people just didn't care. But the premise that we took away from and made note in the book was, this is your time as a business owner to sell your business and to get the return that you deserve for the 10, 20, 30 years that you've operated this business, and put your entire existence, your net worth on the line every single day. It's your time to think maybe just a little bit selfish. Your employees, if they're good, and I'm assuming they are good if you're selling your business, they are going to be okay, right? They are going to be taken care of by the person who buys your business.
Yeah, the owner has a little bit of imposter syndrome, and he feels guilty about taking this windfall. But what he's got to remember is he's borne all the risk, right? If the business fails, the employees lose their job. If the business fails, the owner loses everything. So there wouldn't be a job in the first place if it wasn't for the owner. So there is nothing wrong with exiting and collecting a windfall at the end of the day. The government's going to share a good chunk of it anyway, and your team, they'll be fine. It's like when you have to terminate somebody. I mean, when I've terminated people, within a year they were all in a better position than they were when they were with me. What I was really doing was holding them back from being successful somewhere else. And I think the same thing applies to this. Nobody's going to buy your company to fire everybody. I mean, that's part of what they're buying.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
no,
that's amazing, because that has been a fear, um, throughout the 30 years that I've done M&A, is this magical, group of employees that are going to come in and take your employees. And again, we don't really even go into that in the book. We do address that there is this employee, what about my employees? And again, we want the business owner to realize that they're going to be okay. And then finally, it's interesting, Matt, we remember that the takeaway in in the interviews was how loyalty and employee loyalty quickly, yeah, it's pretty funny, Paul, is the loyalty, they're my employees, and how could I do this to them? Well, 2 weeks later, it's somebody else signing their paycheck, and guess what? Guess who they're loyal to now? The person who
Yeah.
signed their paycheck. Um, anyways, on employees, it was some fascinating stuff.
Loyalty can't be purchased, but it can be rented.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the biggest point there, just to kind of, put a bow on, is exactly what you guys said. Like, that's why, especially in the home service space, that's what they're buying. They're buying a team that produces cash flow, right? And the more
Mhm.
predictable it is, the higher they're going to pay and all that kind of stuff. Um, and at the end of the day, they're not going to fire good employees. If you're a crappy employee, yeah, they might fire you, and it might be the same person that you wanted to fire for the last 10 years and you were too afraid to do it. So, really good insight there. I want to go back to uh, when you first said you looked at the people that use representation, whether it's M&A advisor, broker, investment bank, versus people that did it solo, and the people that did it solo made the mistakes that the other folks did. And what are some of like the common mistakes you see people make when they are trying to sell their business by themselves? Because let's be honest, right now is probably the easiest time in the history to sell your business without a broker and advisor, because PE's sending everybody letters and postcards and phone calls and all that. And we get all excited. And then, once we start seeing dollars, we're like, why would I give somebody 10% of this? Or why would I give somebody 8% of this? Or why would I pay someone a success fee when I don't have to? So, what are some of those mistakes that lead to time, money, stress, all the things that go into making mistakes?
Matt,
Let
you
me
want
let
me
me
to take it,
start.
or do you want to jump in?
Let me start, and then you take over.
Okay.
Well, let me ask this question: why would you use a realtor to sell your house? Right? You use a realtor to sell your house because it gets it in front of more people who are potential buyers, so that you have competition for the house, which results in a greater price. The realtor will walk through your house and tell you, your hot pink fuchsia wall might impede the sale. Maybe we should paint this, beige. It's the same thing when you're using a business broker. They'll help you, or an investment bank, or a M&A advisor. They will help you clean up elements of your business that will cause it to sell faster and for a better price. They'll present you in front of more than one buyer, and you know what the market is when you have multiple people competing for your company. Um, when I sold my business, I used an investment bank, and we started out with 65 companies that were attracted to us, narrowed it to 10, ended up in an auction with 4 companies. We knew we were getting the best price because we had 4 companies trying to outbid each other for the company. If we had just done it on our own, and we almost did a couple of years earlier, we would have sold for a fraction of that. And it was not a good price, and we didn't really know it because we didn't know what the market was. So, Brandon can talk about this. I mean, you also see mistakes like equity rolls. You're talking to a private equity buyer, and he says, "Man, this is great. You're going to get a second bite of the apple," and they talk you into rolling 40% of your equity forward. And it may be more than you really should, but you get glassy eyed, and the only information you're getting is coming from this one buyer instead of from multiple people. That's just one of the areas. Counting your earnout as part of your cash. Earnouts aren't guaranteed. They're bonuses if you get them. And I know that there's some M&A advisors out there that actually teach that, which is a mistake. Brandon?
Okay. So let let's go back to the emotional side of not getting help. Why do people not get help? Because Paul, they're in their office one day, and for some reason, today's the day that they answer that call from the private equity guy, or the search company that's hired by the private equity, and they take a phone call. And for some reason, they start listening. Wow, we're here to buy your business, and we want to offer you millions of dollars. And all of a sudden, before they know, and we interviewed many people, not just in home contracting, that sold their businesses like this. Like, I took the phone call, and the next thing I know, I was selling my business. So let's go back to the book, right? So now we're selling the thing that drives us through life, our business, on a phone call. We haven't gone through the self-actualization analysis of, wow, I want to spend more time with my grandkids. I want to retire. I want to spend more time with my family. It's just some guy called me out of the clear blue. And next thing I know, I have this LOI, and I could tell stories, not not associated with the book, but deals where private equity, made offers, like offers on initial phone calls and asking my client to take 50% of an earnout. Well, I mean, you would have to be insane to take something like that, not knowing who you're talking to, but people did it. We've had conversations in the book where people did not have proper guidance, and really, it's not so much the value, it's not so much um, uh, the structure, and they were wrong. They made bad mistakes, but it's the emotional side of it. They've sold, and they really weren't looking to sell their business.
They get carried away, they get money whipped. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like somebody knocking on the door of your house, to go back to the real estate example, saying, "Wow, I really like this house. I'll give you 200,000 for it." And you think, "Well, I bought it for 60,000. This is awesome." And only later do you realize that your house is really worth 400,000, right? So
Yeah. And I think,
And,
and
and
I
again,
obviously with,
going to the emotional again, and now you've finalized a business transaction, and now you go, oh my God, I'm 55 years old, and did I really want to sell? And the answer for a lot of these former business owners is no, I really didn't, or I don't know what to do. And there's a big section of our book that addresses, that reality. And you know, I'm guilty of it as a advisor, is let's get the transaction done. Let's not necessarily worry about day after. It was during the course of this book and working with Matt where I really realized, wow, it's a real hurdle for some people. And Matt, I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about a lot of business owners. Like they in life, they no longer have to worry about money, or they don't have the stress, right? That business. I mean, we had some conversations about what people honestly said about stress, and all of a sudden that's gone, and now they got to look themselves in the mirror every day, and it could be tough for some people.
stress, there's a lot of people that are stress junkies. I'm probably one of them. And the more type A somebody was, the more likely they were to go through some type of depression after they've walked away. But here's an important part of this is Brandon talked about some of the mistakes and some of the things that people feel were they don't talk about these. People do not talk about how they screwed up to other people, but and sometimes they've got a confidentiality agreement that prevents that. But we got them to open up because we promised confidentiality, and for a lot of them, they were just dying to really tell the whole story to somebody. So the readers are going to pick up things that they wouldn't be able to get in conversations at a trade show or somewhere else. And again, as Brandon mentioned, we had pharmacists, we had doctors, we had farmers. I mean,
Roofers.
we had industries all over the map included. Engineering design firms, manufacturers. So there's a broad array of people that this is applicable to, and they're all the
I
same. I mean, the emotions are all the same.
yeah.
Matt,
And
you're bringing up a good point about the trade show, right? I mean, we've talked to and we've heard of people who, did you have an advisor? Did you have an attorney? Did you have an eminent? No, I talked to some guy at a trade show, and he told me that they paid a multiple of, XYZ, and I sold my business on that. And when we were doing this, because we both like to fish, we joked about how you wouldn't go fishing without paying a guide, right? Hey, where's the fish? Something as simple as going fishing, people will pay a guide, but yet they'll go to a trade show and have two conversations with friends who sold their business and think that they have all the information. And it's absolutely, again, it's just it's a recipe for a disaster.
One of the private equity buyers we talked with said that he's got a conversation with a guy, and he's saying, "Yeah, old Joe over there, he got an 8 multiple." And the guy says, "No, he didn't, because I bought his company." There's a lot of fish stories that are out there about
Yeah, nobody
multiples.
ever catches a smaller fish, right? I mean, and great point, Matt. Nobody ever tells you about, yeah, I sold for X amount of dollars, but now I'm miserable as hell because I wish I didn't sell my business, or I don't know
Or
what to do with myself.
or they made a mistake and they didn't take enough cash at close, and now they can't survive on what they've got after tax, and they've got to go to work for
Lifestyle. Yeah.
somebody else. So now you've got somebody who's been self-employed all of his life or a good chunk of his life and is probably unemployable at this point. And he's got to suck it up and go to work for the guys that purchased his company. And most of those don't last 2 years.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, kinda going back to what you're talking about, not knowing what the market is compared to real estate. I mean, at least with real estate, you kinda have a pretty good idea of what, like, houses are selling for. In the private business space, you have no idea, right?
Right.
Unless you're doing
Right.
this day in and day out, and like you said, you're bringing 65, 70 buyers to the table and doing that whole process. So, to me, that's even, like, a bigger thing. If someone knocks on my door and says, "Hey, we wanna buy your house for this," worst case scenario, I go to Zillow and be like, "Well, it's actually worth this, so no, I'm good." But I've talked to people who they thought they were getting, life-changing money, which it was. Maybe someone offered them 5 million bucks and then they sell it for 5 million bucks. And then after the fact, they're talking to, someone that does this every day like you guys, and like, man, your business was actually worth like 18 to 22 million. They're like, what? Right? Because they just don't know, because for so long, so many business owners, whether it's trades or not, they were the technician who started it, and they didn't really start it to sell it, right? Now it's all of a sudden these businesses are a lot more accessible. People can buy them. There's a market for them, and they're offered money that they never thought was possible. They're like, yeah, I'll take it, until they realize after the fact that it was worth a lot more. So I want to go into, kind of the post, and Brandon, it kind of alluded to it of, for the longest time, you guys never really even talked about it of what are you going to do after. It's like, let's just get the deal done and then figure out after. After having all these conversations, talking to people, what was kind of like the general consensus of what do they wish they would have done? Because pretty much everybody I talked to, they're like, I'll figure it out after I sell. I just want to sell this thing. But now that you know what you know now and all the people you've talked to, what are some of the things that, like, they said, I wish we would have done this so I was better prepared post close. I wish we would have done this, or I wish, what are just some general themes or things that you saw kind of float to the top of, people that were depressed and just kind of lost after they sold their business?
Brandon?
Some of them go up to the ranch in North Texas and hang out. I'm taking a poke. I'm taking a poke at Matt. Um, First off, Paul, there's no um answer in the book. Like, this is what you should go travel the world. Well, some people don't want to travel the world, right? So we don't have this like antidote, like this is what you should do.
But there are plenty that do. I mean,
Yeah, and because everybody has somewhat of a different emotional response, and it is contingent upon, as Matt already pointed out, are you extroverted? Are you an introvert? Are you a female? Are you a male? What age are you? Right? I mean, y- there's so many people today selling businesses to private equity that are 50 years old. Well, that 50-year-old former business owner, he's certainly going to have a different outlook on the remaining years that he has on earth than the 67-year-old dentist that finally decides to retire and sells his practice, right? And again, there's no cutoff on age, but we certainly found that the older a business owner is at selling their business, the least, there's more or less, I should say, post transaction, what do I want to do with my life?
well, there's also a factor in this that when you own a business, your identity is tied up in that, and
Right.
and it's a part of you, and you're no longer a part of that. And we had one woman who was a multi-generation business owner. For various reasons, she had to sell it, and she couldn't just pass it on to the next generation because she owned it jointly with her sister. So she sold it, and then she didn't know how to tell people who she was. She didn't know how to introduce herself. She was unable to do that because this is who I've been my whole life, my whole adult life. So she hired a business coach to teach her how to introduce her to people. That's the type of loss of identity that's out there, and it's also there's even though the business is gone, and Brandon's really good about telling people, you you got the money, right? You sold the business, did the check clear, and it's not your company anymore, but it doesn't feel that way. you know, and there are people that, keep a running list of all the mistakes that the buyers made. And a lot of times what they want to do is something that's just different. It's not wrong, it's just different. But to the former business owner, it's wrong, right? And it's hard to watch that. And it's like it's hard to watch your daughter marry some guy and they go off and do things that you don't necessarily approve of, where you see them making a mistake and there's nothing you can do about it.
So
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Over the course of not just writing a book, but what I've done for 30 years, I always have expressed that to people. The check cleared, and again, let's hope that it does clear. And it clears. Well, and in most cases it does, right? I mean, and like what you do is you don't own the business anymore. But I have to also be mature enough and I guess analytical enough to realize that somebody grew this thing for 30 years, and the detachment process is going to be harder for some people, and I've witnessed it. I mean, people who just cannot handle the fact that the business that they grew is now being operated or in their eyes ruined by somebody. And the reality of the situation is you don't own it anymore, so
So
stand back and let somebody grow it or ruin it.
So this adds to the importance of purpose, of having a purpose. So let's say that you have a house that you have an emotional attachment to, your kids grew up in it, but it's time to sell it and move on. So you sell it and you buy a new house and your focus is on the new house, not the old one. But if you don't have a new house, you're going to want to drive by your old house. You're going to want to see what they're doing in the lawn. You're going to be critical about it. You're going to think about it a lot. So the importance of a new purpose is it helps you move on beyond the business that has been a part of you for so long. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, I mean, that's a great example too, right? When you're that emotionally attached, it's your identity, right? Having the next step planned so that way you aren't just sitting around driving by the shop, checking their social media, asking other people, "Hey, what's going on?" Going to the supply house and like doing all the things. It's like let's have something in plan. So I think really that's kind of the premise. Like Brandon said, everyone's different, but I think like the key takeaway there is everybody needs to have kind of the next step lined up so that way you can move into the next phase of life. I want to go back briefly as we start to wrap this up. Obviously, you guys, along with talking to all these people, you've also been on both sides of these deals as well. Um, when it comes to the ups and downs of selling a business, you guys have probably also seen a lot of deals you know, die wherever they might die. What are some of the, common themes, biggest things that you see kills a deal when, going back to the emotional attachment, like they're all fired up, they're ready to sell, and then shit hits the fan and something happens. What are some of the biggest deal killers you guys see out there?
Getting pissed off during due diligence and telling them to shove it. I'm not going to do this anymore. I mean, it happens. You know,
Paul, it goes back to the first part of the book is talking about reasons to sell, and it might sound a little bit like, well, I don't need to read about reasons to sell, but you know, when I work with someone, like I want them to have a clear decision that this is what we're going to do because I made whatever the reason is, because I want to move to Mexico and open a daiquiri stand. This is the reason why I'm selling my business. Okay. And as Matt just pointed out, there has to be that I'm going to do this because in every transaction there is some frustration, and it could, due diligence is obviously a big catch-all, right? Like, oh my God, due diligence is hard, but the realization that um, you know, you're selling your business in the third quarter of selling your business becomes this an emotional block that does kill deals. Absolutely. Like I've decided I don't want to sell. And again, going it all ties into everything. If you're working with an advisor should be there to be able to say to the soon to be former business owner, no, you've made this is the right decision, right? Second guessing themselves is certainly a challenge that we have seen.
um, I talked to one guy. This isn't. I don't think this is in the book, but he was set to buy a company, was ready to buy it, that day, and he got a call from the seller, and the seller said, "I can't do it anymore. I can't. I can't." "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "I don't know what I would do when I wake up tomorrow." Boom, deal crashed.
Done. So so that, I mean, that's super helpful. I think for anybody out there that will someday or are currently going through this process and a lot of the things you guys have alluded to. So as we get to wrap it up, guys, what's one thing we didn't talk about that you feel, whether it's from the book or not, that our listeners should know when it comes to selling their business?
The people that took a proactive approach, that made a decision to sell their company, to sell their business, and took active steps to prepare and go through the process, were a lot happier and a lot more comfortable with everything than the people who had a sale forced upon them. Examples: poor health might cause a business to be sold under stress. We had one woman whose husband passed away, and she had to sell the business. We had one guy who showed up, and his wife was sitting there with their children on her lap, handed them to him, and it was clear to him that he either sold the business or he was going to lose his marriage. Those were all stress type of situations, and there are others. A partner flakes. There's lawsuits, there's industry changes that push people into doing this before they're ready. Brandon?
One of the things, and again, it's from the interviews in the book and also my experience, and it's not really discussed enough with smaller to mid-sized businesses that may or may not have a team. A business owner trying to do a business transaction without bringing anybody into the fold
Yep.
is very difficult, and they get done, but it's not going to be a fun process, right? I have to play charades during the day, and then I have to run home and try to cobble together due diligence. I mean, and we interviewed people like that, and I've certainly in years ago I've been part of transactions like that, and it's just not conducive to a a smooth process. I mean, that's a little bit of a macro takeaway, but certainly that's one takeaway. Another is going back to what Matt just said. You find out just what stress people really lived under, right? People opened up to us in these interviews that, wow, right? You for 20 years operated under this stress and they didn't know it, Paul. They didn't know they were operating under that extreme stress because that was their lifestyle. And then once their lifestyle changed with the transaction, they they were able to look and say, wow, I can't believe I lived like that.
Hey, Paul. So the title is roller coaster because we heard that mentioned over and over by people that we interviewed. But think about riding a roller coaster. If you've never ridden one before and you don't really know what's going to happen, and you get in the car, you would be terrified, right? It wouldn't be fun. And if you can see where it's going, you can see the track, you can look at other cars going up and down and maybe doing the loop de loop. Then you approach it knowing that it's going to be safe, knowing what's going to happen, and it can be exhilarating and it can be a lot of fun. And that's the idea behind the book is let's take this life-changing event and let's make it as enjoyable as possible. It should be.
No doubt, Matt. I mean, that's part of the premise, right? Is if someone reads our book, the hope is that they feel like they have been through a journey of selling a business. That's not to say that they have been through the journey or they will 100% have all the answers, but that confidence, right? Just going back to the roller coaster analogy, right? Wow, I know that some point in time I'm going to go through a big loop or I'm going to go down a big hill. We're addressing fears in this book, and it's going to hopefully instill some confidence with a business owner to proceed with a transaction.
Awesome. Gentlemen, Brandon, Matt, thank you for coming on the show, sharing all your wisdom, insights when it comes to exiting our business. So, if our listeners do want to get the book, where is the best place for them to do so?
Amazon. It's just search for the Business Exit Roller Coaster, and you can
Perfect.
search under my name. You can see the spelling on the screen, and you'll see that and at least one other book. It's there.
You're
Awesome.
gonna provide that in the show notes, right, Paul?
Yeah, we'll link it up in the show notes as well. You can just head over to Amazon, the Business Exit Roller Coaster. We'll link that up so that way, guys, you just click it, check it out. But guys, thank you again for coming to the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you
Paul.
so much, Paul.
And everyone else out there, this is how professionals on the financial side, transaction side of trades, and all other businesses look at things. If this episode resonated with you and you want to check out the show notes for this episode and all the other ones, head on over to thebluecollaradvisors.com.